Oh, and also if you are a participant, we'd appreciate it if you could stay mute for when you're not talking, just to make it go more smoothly. So just to go over how the forum will work, each candidate will have an individual 20-minute time slot, and we will begin with a brief introduction to the candidate and their platform. And after that, we will go into questions. So there are no main categories for questions, and anyone can ask them. To ask a question, you can either put it in the chat, or if you would like to ask it yourself, you can raise your hand. I think if you click participants, you should be able to see some little icons at the bottom, and if you click on the hand or the check mark, we'll know you want to talk. So as far as the chat goes, we will try to be as fair as possible and select questions in order of appearance, but we also want to cover a variety of topics, so we might skip over some here and there. And I'd also like to introduce our timekeeper, Devin. Would you like to give a brief introduction? Devin, you're muted.
Really sorry. I have a lot of noise behind me. I don't know if you can tell.
That's totally okay. So thank you. He'll remind us when we need to start wrapping up and keep us on schedule. And before we jump in, I'd like to give a quick summary of who we are. So all of the moderators tonight, as well as myself and a few others who will help manage the chat, are members of Sunrise Annalee High School or other local youth-led groups. And the Sunrise Movement is a youth-led movement to combat climate change and create millions of good jobs in the process. Does anyone have any questions about what we're going to do tonight? All right, I think we're waiting for our first candidate, Diana Rich, and then we'll start hopefully on the dot at 5:20. So just a few more minutes.
I have a little question I could ask while we're waiting. First of all, you guys are awesome. Woo, go Sunrise. I'm so impressed. This is super cool. And I loved your poster.
Thank you.
And I was wondering, did the larger Sunrise movement, did you guys get some like graphics or material? Is this something that other Sunrise groups are doing like in other city councils? This is super cool.
No, this was our idea. We really wanted to do something. And yeah, Sunrise has a style guide, so we were inspired a lot by that. But other than that, this is our project.
Wow. Oh, cool. You're awesome.
Thank you. Still waiting for Diana Rich, I think. Hopefully she'll be on soon.
Ella, would you be willing to go over one more time the policy for questions and how that's going to work?
Yeah, totally. So essentially, each candidate has a 20-minute time slot, and we will begin with a brief introduction to the candidate and their platform. And then after that, we will
see this? About to start. Diana Rich is first.
Yes, we are waiting for Diana to arrive, and then we will hop right in.
These are Annalee students who are running it.
Yeah, most of us.
And Galbraith is there.
So anyway, to ask a question, you can ask anything. You can put it in the chat, or you can, if you click on participants, there should be little icons at the bottom, and if you click on one of those, we'll know you want to talk. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. And I was just reminded, if you can't find the little hand, or not hand thing, the little participant icons, if you raise your hand, hopefully one of us will catch that as well. How many candidates have we endorsed? We endorsed Diana Rich and Evert Fernandez, and there are only 2 slots open on the city council. So that's, yeah, you're welcome. I think we're going to play some music until hopefully Diana, oh, well, someone's waiting, but hopefully until Diana shows up. So Amy will do that. And are we endorsing any local measures? I don't think we've actually discussed that. We've been meaning to, but I think Measure P and O definitely are in the consideration. All right, so it looks like Diana Rich just joined. So I'll pass it over to Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie Guest. I am a freshman at Annalee High School. I am in the Annalee Sunrise group, an Annalee activist group, and a BLM visibility team. I will be the monitor for today's segment with Diana Rich from 5:20 to 5:40. Diana, I want to start off by saying thank you so much for coming tonight. Our 20 minutes will be over at 5:40, and we will have a 3-minute period before it ends. We'd love to start off with a brief overview of your platform and what you have for Sebastopol. And then people are free to start typing questions in the chat or raising your hand.
Thank you for inviting me to participate. It's truly a pleasure to be here. So impressive to see all of these people, young people who are so engaged in our local government and in politics in general. That's fabulous. I apologize for arriving a little bit late. I was actually dealing with my barking dog, but there you go. Anyway, pleasure to be here. I really enjoyed the interview that I had with Sunrise Annalee earlier, so this is a wonderful follow-up opportunity. I have lived in Sebastopol for 20 years, been very involved with the community center. I was the executive director there. I raised my kids here. They went to Parkside, Pinecrest, and Annalee. And I feel as I look at this town and where it's at right now, the situation that we face, my skill set is exactly the right fit for what the town needs. And it's kind of interesting because I've been retired for 2.5 years. You know, life has been pretty good. But at this point, I look at what's going on in the community, and I guess I have a sense that all of you probably share, which is the need to step up and do something that will help my community. I feel very connected to the community, and I feel like the skill set, my collaborative nature, my curiosity about people, my need to connect, people who in some ways may seem to have divergent interests, and bring them together and find those places where their interests intersect that will help us kind of find a path to the future, but with engagement and a contribution from everyone. That's something that is a real natural instinct to me. And it seems like now's the time when those skills are needed. So that's basically my drive for running for city council.
Thank you so much for that. And it looks like we have our first question in the chat, and that is, how will you involve and include youth voices in local government?
How will I include youth in local government?
Mm-hmm.
Every way I can. One thing that really, as I said a few minutes ago, has been incredibly thrilling to me is to see the people that have stepped up during this crisis situation. I think it says a lot about Sebastopol, and I think it says a lot about youth in Sebastopol. you are an example of that drive to be involved and engaged and have a voice in your future. And in fact, let's face it, you are the future. I am 61 years old. I'm going to be gone real soon, and all of you will be leading this country and inheriting whatever we in my generation are setting up to make possible for you with your involvement and your drive, obviously. I would love to see an advisory committee. I've mentioned this before, and I think you'll see that in a lot of what I say about my plans and my hopes for this town. Behind that is a need to make sure that we, in the city government position, don't assume that we know what's best, that we actually ask the people that are affected what they feel is best. So from my perspective, it seems that an advisory committee associated with the city council that would have some gravitas, some power, some authority would be an excellent mechanism for engaging youth. However, I do recognize that youth have a lot of other obligations, and so long-term commitments, a weekly meeting, a monthly meeting might not work. So I would be coming to you as a group and saying, what is the best format? What works best for you? Maybe it's an advisory committee with positions that are assigned, but revolving individuals who can be in those positions. It might be that you say, no, we don't want a continuing obligation. What we want is to actually have the city council come to us through the school office and do monthly presentations to keep us informed.
Thank you
So
much.
whatever works for you is what I'd be interested in.
We have a couple more questions in the chat, and one of them is, how have you been involved in the Black Lives Matter movement in Sebastopol, whether that be personal or for your campaign?
I'm really impressed by the Black Lives Matter movement in Sebastopol. My direct involvement has been really as an observer and applauding from the sidelines at what has been going on in terms of youth involvement, and not just involvement, but the impact that I've seen with the Black Lives mural and with continuing engagement by youth. I have friends who were very interested in connecting with leadership on the Black Lives movement side, youth leadership, and so I put them in touch. I have reached out to that group by text in order to get together with them, and that hasn't really gone anywhere. I did also try to connect them with Patrick Amiel. He's a friend, and he did a wonderful sculpture. I was hoping that that might work out. But again, I haven't heard back, but I also haven't taken the initiative to pursue it, which I will do.
Great, thank you. And then another question is, what in your opinion do you think is the most pressing issue in our community, and what would you like to focus on?
I think the most pressing issue, there's some standard answers. Clearly, the city, there are some basic needs that we have to meet. There's, maintaining the streets and keeping clean water and the streetlights going, public works doing what they need to do. There's business, businesses need to thrive, families need to thrive. Those issues are there. Our social justice issues are there. I happen to think that at the core of all of that is one primary need, and that's a need to reinvigorate our sense of hope for the future, to get us all engaged so that we have a sense of control and a sense that there is a path toward a brighter future that we can have a say in. And I see many ways that we could do that through work groups, through engaging people on very targeted projects, distance learning, social justice, also engaging on the social justice side, more diverse voices in decision-making bodies.
Great, and then I have another question for you. What is your plan to increase Sebastopol's fire preparedness and resilience?
So emergency preparedness in Sebastopol is something that I'm very familiar with. I'm actively involved with the Map Your Neighborhood project and have been for years. And I'm also an active participant with a ham radio group and others on the Sebastopol Neighborhood Communications Unit. What we're trying to do on a local level is establish a way for communications to stay in place effectively in the event of an emergency. The Map Your Neighborhood program also brings together small neighborhood cohorts. I've got a group of 9 homes here in my little Map Your Neighborhood group that provide support and kind of a sense of neighborhood connectedness, honestly, not only in the event of a crisis, but also in these turbulent times when we need to know that there are people next door who care. That system is also connected regionally with the county through Bill Braga and the SNCU unit and Map Your Neighborhood. And those systems in terms of plans for any sort of evacuation pathways, that kind of thing, those are moving forward very rapidly with local and regional and county involvement.
Great. And then this question is focusing on affordable housing. How will you tackle the housing crisis in Sebastopol, and what have you already done to create more affordable housing?
The housing crisis, not just in Sebastopol, but everywhere, is in fact a crisis, and our options are limited. They're limited for reasons that you're probably fully aware of. The options are really on a big picture level. It's either take existing housing stock and repurpose it or expand it. And the other category is to try to build new houses. This is one of those areas where I think we need to really focus on identifying what the population wants. So for instance, in Santa Rosa, I've been heavily involved in the Generation Housing group. They're out of Santa Rosa, and it's a fairly youthful group that's trying to tackle the housing issue. They are looking at dense housing, apartments going up. We could do that in Sebastopol, but the question becomes, is that what our residents need? I think our residents are likely to want to be here in kind of a single family sort of setup. So the first approach is to figure out what the residents, you who might want to live here in the future and be able to afford it, and what is needed, and then target it in a practical way. So if, for instance, we hear that there's an interest in dense housing downtown, so it's all walkable near the core, that would be like 2nd or 3rd story units, which in fact our zoning laws would accommodate right now. They're very lenient. Then the idea would be to target nonprofits to support that effort and a developer who might be friendly to that effort in a way that would build the unit that met the needs of the residents here. The challenges are great. Construction costs are huge, but that doesn't mean that we can't do it. But again, I also think that there's a possible intersect there between the seniors who want to downsize and young families or people like yourselves who want to move into a larger home, rent at an affordable amount, and bring that together in a way that kind of remove the financial barriers.
I think Selena Polston has been raising her hand, so if she wants to speak.
Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't see that.
Thanks for that. No, I put it in the chat, but I did want to follow up with the last question about housing, and that is, so for me, I've been living in Sebastopol for 20 years and was a homeowner, but then got divorced and went to look for a rental in Sebastopol. And what I found was that there were, when I looked online on Craigslist, there were only about 10 to 20 rentals available at any time in Sebastopol. But then when you look on Airbnb or you look on VRBO, there's literally 500 to 1,000 rentals available. This is in all of 95472, not just in the city proper, but in the city itself, a lot of the housing that would be for rental for long-term residents is being used for tourists for short-term. So I just wanted to hear what your perspective was on vacation rentals and their place in the housing crisis in Sebastopol.
Very legitimate concern. At the moment, the concern is kind of been resolved, but I don't know that it's a long-term solution. So there is an ordinance in Sebastopol that is relatively recent, so may not have been in effect when you were looking for a rental, which allows vacation rentals only if they are hosted. So that means that at the very least, if you have someone who owns a home that is in its own property, they can't use that as a vacation rental. It has to be made available for long-term rentals. So that's a relatively recent change. The other piece is that I was recently talking to a homeowner who was actually complaining about this, that at the moment ADUs, there are separate units on a person's property. They aren't connected. They're separate units, but on their property. They cannot be rented out as vacation rentals now. But I think that that's a temporary arrangement during COVID. So at the moment in Sebastopol, the only vacation units the only spaces that can be rented out as vacation units are those that are attached within a home, within an existing home, and hosted by the homeowner. Now that long term, you're still going to have that competition that you have suggested and that push-pull. I do think that our city council is really aware of it and is very focused. And if I'm involved, will continue to be very focused on balancing the need for available rentals against the individuals who have their own homes and they're trying to make a little extra money on vacation rentals. In Sebastopol, just so you know, ADUs, which are the accessory dwelling units, are we're really lenient about building them, and a lot of barriers have been reduced, and those are like the 840 to 1,000 square foot homes. However, you know, and I know that the rental, even if they're made available on a monthly rental basis, the rental rates in Sebastopol are very high. So just saying.
You have 3 minutes left.
Okay, and it looks like this might have to be our last question, but what climate policies do you plan to implement in the city? And a follow-up is, what climate groups are you already a part of?
So I'm part of the, it's the group that does I did sign on. Now would be my opportunity to the Green New Deal pledge and the No Fossil Fuels pledge. And I am in support of the initiative that looks at carbon taxes. I feel like when I look at climate change, the real challenge here in Sebastopol is not the organization that we belong to. It's how to deal with our greenhouse gases. And I'm honestly not certain how we can tackle this in a productive way. And I suppose that's part of my push on the city council. I'm not interested in grandstanding or getting attention. I'm interested in us finding some very practical solutions. So right now, if you look at the county's assessment of greenhouse gases from 2015 to 2018, our use of greenhouse gases has actually increased, now countywide. Now, it's not horrible for Sebastopol, it's about 1% increase, but throughout the county, it's 3%. How do we deal with that issue? Because honestly, as I looked at climate change and our control in Sebastopol, that's the area where we need to focus. So we need to come up with some creative solutions that will reduce the number of hours that we spend in cars, the miles that are traveled in our vehicles, or increase the number of electric vehicles that we have, that our individuals who are residents in Sebastopol are driving. I think that's our biggest push. Increase the use of electric vehicles, and maybe come up honestly with a creative solution that supports a business that does deliveries out of Santa Rosa. Maybe there's a way for all of us, instead of going individually to pick up products in Santa Rosa or wherever we go, maybe we can combine forces and collaborate, and maybe in that way provide the launch for a new business that might succeed in this very challenging business climate. Oh, and then I wanted to answer, I failed to answer in the earlier question, one piece of it, which is what have I done so far in terms of housing? And my involvement has been to really try to gather information by connecting with Jesus Guzman, for instance, at Generation Housing, and looking at collaborative efforts to convert commercial space to housing, address the unhoused issue on Morris Street, and try to deal with Sebastopol situation.
Great, thank you so much. And it looks like our next candidate has yet to get on the Zoom. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna ask you one more question. And
Sure.
that's, what have you done to help small businesses in Sebastopol?
So it's interesting to be presented with these questions. I understand why you're going at it in this way, but as an individual who's lived in town, I suppose my answer needs to be focused on as a 20-year resident, not an incumbent, but as a 20-year resident who has lived here. I've done a lot for businesses here in Sebastopol. I'm a member of the Rotary Club. I've done a lot of projects on a volunteer basis that have helped businesses connect with youth in ways that, you know, go everything from placing youth in internship arrangements with businesses to providing youth the opportunity to tour businesses and get jobs there, to assisting them in developing connections with other parts of the town. As an incumbent, I think I bring to this particular, not as an incumbent, but as a newbie, I think what I bring to this particular position is those connections all over town that can then be utilized on a city council basis to bring together in a collaborative and creative way all of these varying interests that make up our wonderful, quirky little town.
Thank you so much. And Sala, do we know if the next candidate has joined?
He has not arrived yet, so we'll wait on that for a minute. I just wanted to say also though, if you guys still have questions for the candidates, I was thinking I could save the chat and send them any other questions that you weren't able to ask right now or later on in the night as well. So feel free to keep adding questions for candidates even if they're not able to answer, if that makes sense. And we'll make sure to try and get them to the candidates.
Makes complete sense to me. Just
Awesome.
who is your next candidate in order here?
Michael Carnacchi.
Okay, yeah, he'll definitely, I'm sure he'll be on.
Oh, yes, he's waiting right now. I'll just let him in.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions by email or in any other way that you'd like to share them with me. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much for coming.
Bye.
All right, so my name's Amy, and I am part of Sunrise Annalee High School. My preferred pronouns are she, her, hers, and they, them, theirs, and I'm going to be the moderator for this section. So our time slot will begin at 5:43 and end at 6:03. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for taking the time to come tonight. We really appreciate it. So we would like to start by having a brief overview of your platform, and then after that, we'll read questions off as they come in the chat. You're muted.
Hey, thank you for letting me know. So I recognize some of the faces here. It's great. Nice to see you all. Again, I got to share a funny story because I had sent to you after you had already made the endorsements an email stating that it would seem like a waste of our time if you had already made up your decision to come to the second one. So today I was at the dentist earlier and I ran into one of your fathers. And I don't know which one it is, and I can't tell from looking at you, but he said to me, I'm walking by, he says, "You're one of the council members, aren't you?" And I went, "Oh, yeah." He says, "Well, my daughter is participating, and you said that you weren't going to participate in the forum because they had already made their decision." And I said, "I did." And he said, "I thought I was going to get it from him." He said, "Well, that's good because they really need to kind of learn that. Like, you know, it didn't make so much sense to me either for them to go ahead and make the decision." So anyways, one of your fathers is on my side with what I did. so there you have it. Okay, so my platform. So I think that since you already made your decision, I'm not going to talk much about my platform. I am going to talk about something that I think relates to you definitely is with regard to what I view for the Sebastopol the West Sonoma County Union High School District, working in conjunction with the Sebastopol Union School District. And so it seems to me, you know, I've been to many of the meetings, that the problem is that there's no funding because enrollment is down. So the goal would be to bring up enrollment, I think. And I think that there needs to be a greater vision for both schools working together. And I think that Sebastopol should become and be known as the language and cultural arts center of Sonoma County. And I think that it can be achieved fairly easily, because currently at Parkside Elementary School, we have 40 to 45% bilingual students. So my suggestion would be that they should work really good at bringing in and teaching the teaching the English only students, immersing them in Spanish right away at Parkside. So that way they are learning 2 languages and they can talk with each other, and it breaks down the cultural barriers, and they can practice their languages. So then when they get to Brookhaven, you know, they're going to be already bilingual, and they could take a 3rd or a 4th language, so that by the time they get to Annalee, they are multilingual, which is beneficial for the health. You're less likely to get Alzheimer's. You're more employable. You can communicate with a lot more cultures. I think that really is beneficial, and it should be pretty easy to accomplish that if we have some vision, I think, and some wherewithal to follow through with it. The other context of that is the vocational training, which I think there's a lot of talk about about vulnerable homeless people that are vulnerable in a vulnerable position. I want to flip that and call them homeless vulnerable. And those are your classmates that are getting out of El Molino and Annalee that are not excelling academically. I think that they are the vulnerable homeless. I mean, the homeless vulnerable. In other words, what do they have when they get out of high school? They have, they could go into being a barista. They could maybe go into the JC, or they could do drugs. They could get, you know, the mental illness could set in, and they could end up homeless. And once you set down that path, it's pretty hard to reverse, which we're seeing a lot of people trying to deal with the problem on the surface now with all the homeless people and trying to house them. So I think if we cut off, if we start in the education in the schools, it will prevent future homeless people, because, hold on, let me regather my thoughts. And the way to do that is by immersing those students, if they're not excelling academically, to immerse them into vocational education so that they learn to frame a house, they learn to put in electricity, they learn to put on a roof, they learn to side it and do the air conditioning. So that way they can come out of high school with a vocation, and they can go right into a union job, perhaps making good money. They're less likely to end up homeless. They'll have to, of course, if they're not excelling academically, in order to get into the vocational program, they would have to learn some basic math, because you have to cut and you have to measure and that kind of thing. So this would give those students that aren't excelling academically inspiration to get into some academic training. So they would have to go into some math before they could enter into the vocational education. And you know, the high school district is sitting on a $90 million bond, I think, and I mean, the money is there. It's just about getting the money for the staffing. So with the latest tax that passed, I think it's possible that we could really become the Language and Vocational Arts Center of Sonoma County, which would bring up the enrollment in both schools, which would end our financial woes, and it would just create a smarter community altogether. So that was a little bit long-winded. It was a little bit bouncing around a little bit, but that's kind of my vision for the school. So I'm open to questions with that or anything else.
All right. So kind of a follow-up question. What have you done to support affordable housing projects in town so that more families can afford to live here?
Right. There hasn't been any real affordable housing projects coming through that I'm aware of. There was one talk of the one on Bodega, but I think that, as I voiced before, we have to be careful with affordable housing, because if we don't have the job base, then you have a bunch of people living at a discounted rate that have to commute to their jobs and back and forth, which is traffic and pollution and more climate change. So I think that we have to be careful. If we build a bunch of affordable housing and we don't have a job base here in Sebastopol or some way for them to get to those jobs, then it could be actually a detriment to the climate. So I would just be very cautious with any affordable housing projects that would come before City Council. I would be very, very, very cautious to take into all the considerations and all of the possible ramifications that could come with it.
Okay. So if you close one high school, what do you advocate doing with the property?
Say that again?
If you close one high school, what do you advocate doing with the property?
Well, I don't advocate closing the high school. I think we just need to take Elmo and make that into the vocational arts center over there. And it could be theatrical arts too, because you got the new theater. I think that if you could envision the vision of becoming a language and vocational arts center of Sonoma County, you wouldn't need Laguna. So Laguna, that could close, and that could become some teacher housing at some point. But there would be no need for that. You would eliminate that need. But right now, I think it's important that we just keep them all open.
Okay. So would you consider defunding the police budget in order to address housing and education issues in Sebastopol, like redistributing that money for education and support for the unsheltered?
So no, for a short answer, I would, if I was going to, I think that rather than defunding the police department, it looks, when you look at the numbers in the pie, it looks like we give it an inordinate amount of money, a disproportionate amount to the police department, which is true. If we increase our budget as a whole, the percentage we're giving to the police department is less. So I think that that's really where the answer is. But if you look at this year's budget, which will be on the agenda tonight, the police budget actually increased. And that was largely in part to hiring Jerry Threet to come in and do the audit, which I was against for that reason, and for the reason that we should have went out for a request for proposals and had more candidates for the job before just selecting one right off the bat. So you want to talk about reducing the police budget, but we're actually increasing the budget. I don't know what to say other than that.
Okay. Are you in support of Measure P, which is a local county measure for police oversight and accountability?
I voted no on that. I already voted.
Okay. Let's see. What actions will you take to shift Sebastopol to sustainability, and what is your climate policy?
Well, the climate policy is, I mean, I've been saying this for years. We have these nice receptacles on Main Street, but one is all done really nice by the Pierces, bless their heart. They put all these stickers on the one side for recyclables, but they are so contaminated that it's just one truck. It's not even a separate truck anymore that comes and picks up the garbage. So all the garbage and the recycling, it all goes into the trash. And so until we come up with something good, which I've been pushing for since before I got on council, for some sort of good receptacles on Main Street, which we just don't have, and it seems to be just falling on deaf ears every time I bring that up. So with regard to climate as a whole, we're doing pretty good on Sebastopol with our policies as it is, with the solar panels and our policies that we already have. So I don't know what else I don't really have a platform for climate.
Okay.
Well, back up. Actually, I did when I first ran for when I first ran for city council, I did advocate for a 10-cent disposable coffee cup tax, which would be, you know, if you don't bring your cup, now if you bring your own cup, or it used to be where you bring your own cup, you would get 10 cents off your drink. It would be flipped around where if you don't bring your own cup, it's 10 cents more. So that would raise a little bit of revenue for Sebastopol and reduce the lids in particular. So, you know.
Okay.
This is a lot of pressure.
So really quick, could you explain a bit why you voted against Measure P?
Yeah, I didn't have enough information about it, and I just, you know, anytime that I think that the measure isn't well enough defined, I'll vote against it. I mean, yeah. And I just didn't think, I thought there were too many questions with regard to the sheriff, and, you know, I don't know. I think that the police departments are getting picked on as a whole now. I think that the Sebastopol Police Department.
Okay. How will you tackle the housing?
Janina, I saw you there. That's good. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's all right. It's cool. I get it. I should probably shut up. But, you know, I just want to say, Sebastopol Police, we currently have 5 bilingual officers, 4 that speak Spanish, and a 5th that speaks Chinese. I think it's Cantonese, actually. So we're pretty diverse in the Sebastopol Police Department at this point.
Okay. So how will you tackle the housing crisis in Sebastopol? And what about like the series law?
The what? The series lot? The series garden, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not going to be affordable housing. The proposition that's coming through there is market rate housing. So there's no affordable housing. There's an affordable component to it, but not much. So the housing that's talked about that. And I think, you know, anytime that you start talking about putting houses where there's this amazing garden that does all these great things for humans in our community and is founded in such great principles. So when you think about it just as a whole, it's like, wow, we're going to pave over this garden to put houses on it. You know, it's like, I'm against that project as it stands coming through.
Okay. Tell us about your role in scuttling the Pine Grove development proposal.
Wow, who made up these questions? And what kind of language is that, scuttling? You know, it's like, it sounds like you've been fed some questions by some people here. How do you know about that? Just out of curiosity.
This one was not mine, so I'm just.
I see. Oh, I see. So you're not stating where the questions are coming from?
No, I'm just reading them from the chat as they come up.
Okay. So the Pine Grove Square project was proposed to build housing in a very, very prime location for parking. And there was zero outreach done to the community and to the business owners in the downtown district. And so I was pretty much against that. So my role, I don't know what role I played other than to mobilize the merchants to stand up and say no. And I think that kind of did it more than anything else. And it's kind of in hindsight, it's a good idea because we have this amazing Thrive Construction has taken over the old Roundtable building. So they have really big plans for that. And there's going to need to be parking for sure. So I think in the end, that was a good decision.
You have 3 more minutes.
All right. So what are you like most proud of as a council member? Just in terms of like either a project or just like a role that you've played on council?
So I think that our relationship with Caltrans right now is the best that it's ever been. And a good example of that is the ADA upgrades that were happening in the downtown. That was probably the smoothest job that we've ever had with Caltrans, and we've made really good contacts and connections with Caltrans all the way up to both the regional and the district manager with directors. And so that's really important because the two main intersections that intersect in our downtown are both state highways. And it's important that we have a good relationship with Caltrans because all state funding pays for that. So if we're thinking far enough in advance and we can come up with a plan that looks out 6 years, we can get state funding to go ahead and implement it, which includes our sidewalks and really doing up and remaking our downtown.
All right, that sounds really great. I think that is all our time right now.
One more time, actually. 2 more minutes.
Guess my computer must be off. All right. I will do one last question then. So the council is a team, and what do you bring to the council?
I bring to the team. Well, I think that I have an independent view of things. You know, I think that I bring up points of view that other council members may not necessarily bring up. And I think it's really important that, you know, if everybody's thinking in the same way, it creates groupthink is what it is. And you know, it's kind of like, you know, if one person says this is a good idea, and then a second person joins in, and then a third person says, well, because you think it's a good idea, and you think it's a good idea, then I think it's a good idea. And then before you know it, everybody thinks it's a good idea, and there's not been any real critical thinking in that. And, you know, I think as good as the bicycle lanes are in Sebastopol for creating safety for bicyclists, I think that one of the unforeseen circumstances that developed with that is it slowed down traffic, and we have a lot more idling cars in the downtown. So while the idea is to cut down greenhouse gas by getting people on your bicycles, in this particular case, you know, the idling cars pollute the most, and they are actually going opposite of what the idea of the bike lanes was supposed to do in the first place. So I think that I bring a critical way of thinking to the council that hopefully spurs people to think in a different way.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it.
Boy, did I ever fail this one. Good. This is great. So, yeah, I should have kept with what I said and agreed with your dad and said, no, I'm just not going to do it because this was pretty tough. So now I'm sure you're really glad that you didn't endorse me, even though I wouldn't accept it. But I appreciate you all, and thanks for your time.
Well, we're really glad you joined us because I think not just for us, but for a lot of the eligible voters, and also we recorded the questions, so we'll be just,
got it.
Yeah, so thank you for attending.
Yeah. Well, I should have stopped at the first one. I think that my input on the first little form that we had was really good. So hopefully you'll keep that one up as well. Because I do have a beautiful vision for Sebastopol, and sometimes I might not be able to expound it exactly right. You know, in the end, if I'm not elected, that's fine. I mean, it's good to be a private citizen again.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. Our next candidate, Evert, is waiting to come in, so I'm going to let him in. I just want to say one more time, though, if we did not get to your question, I am going to make sure the candidates get them. You hear a strange echo? Anyway. All right. Some weird noises going on for me, but I just let in Evert, so.
All right. So, hello, I'm Rachel, and my preferred pronouns are she, her. I'm the hub coordinator of Sunrise Annalee High School, and I'm going to be the moderator for our segment with Evert Fernandez. So our time slot looks like I'm a minute early, but I think that's okay. Our time slot goes from 6:06 to 6:26, and we'll have someone, we'll have Devin butt in to warn us when we have 3 minutes left. Okay, so Evert, thank you so much for being here tonight. So our 20 minutes will be over at 6:26. And so we'd love to start off with a brief overview of your platform, and then people are free to start typing questions in the chat or to raise their hand.
Good.
All right, so can you give us a brief overview of your platform and what you stand
Sorry,
for?
I kind of lost you there for a second. Hi, I'm Evert Fernandez. I'm running for Sebastopol City Council. I'm born and raised in Sebastopol. Went to Annalee High School a few years back. And I am running because of several things. First of all, my qualifications. I've been on the Planning Commission for 10 years. I've participated in a lot of community events and volunteered. And I care about my town, Sebastopol. So I'm stepping up. I also bring diversity to the council, but that's not the reason people should vote for me. They should vote for me because of my leadership, my experience, and some of my background and the things that I've done. I am looking to, as far as my top goals, I'm sure you'll probably ask me about that. I'll just give them to you in generally, is to help the city recover from the pandemic. You know, housing is always an issue, and our environment, parks, and so forth. So I know you don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to try to keep it short, and that way you guys can ask me whatever questions you'd like to know.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing this, by the way.
Thank you. So let's start off with, what is your plan to increase Sebastopol's fire preparedness and resiliency?
Well, I think it's, first of all, find out what the existing plan is. And I think they've done a pretty good job. There's also, besides fire, there's also flood issues that we've come across. And so my plan would be to kind of study it, also to find out what the current plan is, where can we improve it? And are we keeping a good communication with other communities? Because that's also important, what's going on around us from that standpoint. And then what we can do to help people that are being evacuated. Sebastopol's been fortunate as far as the fires, that a lot of people have come here. You know, I put people up, and I'm sure some of my neighbors have, and you know, we're happy to do it. It's something we can do to help. And what more can we do to help those citizens? But I'd say that communication is the key. Getting people prepared, having you know, still encouraging people to have emergency kits. Have a plan in place is really important.
Thank you. So can you tell us about your plans to make living here more affordable? Well,
Unfortunately, we've done such a good job of Sebastopol that it's just make it a nice place to live and makes it, you know, more expensive. Affordability has to do, I guess, with demand and people wanting to live here. I think that we just need to be careful of looking at what costs are being passed on. So when we do a project or a development and we have certain fees that are charged to the builders, those fees don't necessarily get absorbed by the builder. Those get passed on. Different types of taxes also cause things to be a little bit more expensive. And we just need to look at the type of citizens that we have, what their needs are, and get some housing for a different variety of families that come into the area. But it's, you know, it's tough that now that the city is the way it is, it's hard to make it, you know, less desirable in a way. So what we want to do is try to keep it as affordable as possible, and there's some creativity that we need to do in order to accomplish that.
Great, thank you so much. And I understand that this can be like a stressful situation, so thank you also just for accepting our offer and coming here. Your answers have been great. So the next question is, what can be done to help small businesses?
That's a good question. So my background is I've been a business advisor with the Small Business Development Center for about 20 years. So I've worked with a lot of small businesses around the flooding, the fires, the pandemic, and they're hurting. So Some of the solutions that have been come up with is loans or grants to the businesses, but you have to kind of look at each business individually and see where they're at. Should they be getting loans or grants? Is that just going to prolong their situation to where they're going to get more in debt and then go out of business anyway? So first of all, it's just to take a look at the business, help them. There's ways and there's programs to have their business evaluated at no cost to them. So that's the first thing, because it's like a doctor. You go to a doctor's office, they're not just going to give you medicine. They're going to examine you, find out your background, and so forth, your health, before they do that. The other thing I think we can do to help businesses is support stay-at-home workers. And stay-at-home workers would help in multiple benefits. Number one, they're driving less, so it helps the environment. Number two is because they have more time, they can devote more time to the school and the community, and also support local business. Because usually when they're gone, they're not going to have lunches here, or they get home late. They're not going to be supporting the businesses in town. So I think that's a key factor
Evert Fernandez.
To encourage stay at home and support them.
All right, thank you. So how will you involve and include youth voices in local government?
Well, I'm doing that right now. So I have a lot of respect for what you guys have done. You guys have reached out to me, and I really respect and value your positions, what you guys are trying to do. And so it's important for me to meet with you, give you the respect that you deserve, and hear your voice, because I want to know what's on the horizon. What are you guys doing? You guys see things differently. You guys, different generation. You guys are communicate differently. I want to know what is important to you. What are you concerned about? How can we reach you? How do you want to participate? So, I want to know that, and the only way to know that is to talk to people in that age group, in that group, to help us make proper decisions, and maybe there's things that we're not really taking into consideration. So, being involved, keeping involved, and speaking with groups whenever they reach out.
Great, thanks. So our next question is regarding emergency. So do you support Sebastopol's Map Your Neighborhood program?
Yeah, I think it's important. One of the things I was trying to encourage is to neighbors and neighborhoods to get to know themselves, each other around your neighborhood. Who are your neighbors? Are they elderly? Do they have certain needs? So that we can kind of help each other when it comes time for an emergency or an evacuation. And know where all the different, I went around Sebastopol delivering door hangers for part of my campaign, information about myself. And as long as I've lived here for many, many years, I'm surprised at how many little neighborhoods or houses in the back that I didn't even know were there. And so that's why it's important for everybody to—
I thought he was an immigration rights attorney. I think that's what he is.
So anyway.
If you have a question, feel free to ask it after Evert finishes answering this question. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm totally for mapping the neighborhoods and seeing who's there and neighbors helping each other.
All right. Did someone have a question for Evert that they went off mute for, or should I continue? Okay, I'm going to continue.
Okay.
So this next question is a long one, so if you need me to repeat parts of it, I can. So do you support California's Prop 16, which permits government decision, such as making policies to consider race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in order to address diversity by repealing constitutional provision prohibiting such policies?
That's a complicated issue. In general, I do support policies that help with diversity. I think that there's a lot of factors. It's not just inviting people to participate in the process. It's also finding those individuals that want to, and oftentimes it's not a matter of them wanting to. Sometimes the diverse groups are in a lower economic situation, so they can't participate. They're too busy. They don't have the time or the desire to do it. They're barely hanging on, getting food for their family, working different jobs. A lot of them aren't working from home. They're service organizations. So what we can do to help at least be aware of the diversity. There isn't one fix-all, and even some of these propositions, I support, but you never know what the consequences are afterwards from him. So it's kind of, you have to wait and see how that works from that standpoint. But I think it's a matter of being aware of what's available and how can you communicate, how can you encourage other diverse individuals. And that's one of the, as I mentioned, one of the reasons that I'm stepping in, because I looked around me, there's nobody here but me as far as who's going to step up. And so that's what I'm doing. So I'm all for the diversity and trying to help with that cause.
All right. And I just want to quickly remind everyone to mute themselves when we have not called on you yet. Okay, so next question. What climate policies do you plan to implement in the city?
Okay, well, we already have a lot of we have a climate action committee in the city. They've passed some different regulations regarding getting rid of styrofoam. So there's a lot of already what the city has done. So first of all is to make sure and continue those plans to move along. And we're a small community, so I think the things that we do, they help the environment in a small way, but it's more about setting an example. And so I would work with my other council members to see what other areas we can improve on. And as I mentioned, one of the areas is supporting the stay-at-home individuals. That's an immediate impact. If people aren't driving and they're supported enough, so they're successful. And even supporting individuals that are unemployed and need some assistance to either get trained or to resources to find those types of jobs. I think we can at least be a resource to recommend that. So I'd say, look at what the Climate Action Committee is doing. I think we should also have a Housing Action Committee as well. And that's one of the things that I'd like to see started, because there's a lot of complexities with the housing market. And so I think with climate, the housing kind of go hand in hand in a lot of different ways. Promoting alternate transportation, making it easy for people to walk in town, bike, and so forth.
Great, thank you. So I see that Mateo has his hand raised, so you are free to talk.
Hi, Mateo.
Hi, I had a sort of related question to the question that I asked earlier in the chat about Proposition 16. Mm-hmm. Do you support the idea that schools, mainly universities or colleges, or job applications should consider race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin, for example, to be accepted as a job applicant?
I think that need to be looked at is, in my particular case, I'm not asking people to vote for me because I'm diverse. I'm asking for people to vote for me because of my experience, and diversity is kind of a bonus. But I think there should be room to set aside certain number of acceptances. They should look at the makeup of the college and the university and who their students are, and try to help those. Be fair though, you got to be fair about it, but try to help have a diverse campus in the university. And, you know, because you don't want it, I don't want it to go the other way. I don't want to be reverse discrimination either. So, but it needs to be considered. What's the makeup? How can they improve that? And not just for students and faculty, but also, I mean, not students, but also faculties. And in the work environment, yeah, there should be ways that they, I mean, maybe they should at least interview so many appropriate candidates. But again, you know, at the end of the day, hopefully, whatever color, race, origin, preference, whatever, you know, hopefully pick a candidate that will help the business ultimately. But I think there's a lot of room for that. I think they should consider that.
Thank you. So I want to address Judy's question. So this meeting in particular was planned by Sunrise Annalee High School, but she's asking, is there a future event in which you are meeting voters to continue the dialogue?
You know, I've got another event coming up. I believe it's on October 23rd. You can go to my website to see what other events I've got coming up. It's with a KOWS radio station. And they're going to have a forum with candidates there. I'm always available by phone if people want to get a hold of me. I've got individuals that are calling voters, and always make it available that if they need to speak to me on certain issues. But anyway, if you want to see my schedule, you go to vote.evertfernandez.com, and Evert, E-V-E-R-T, and then Fernandez is with a Z.
Okay. So how have you been involved in the movement for Black Lives in Sebastopol?
Well, I'm involved in a movement right now by throwing my hat in a ring and running. And that's what I asked myself is, what can I do for this cause? And yeah, you know, I can march or encourage others to participate, but I've realize that the best thing that I can do is participate in our local government and have a seat at the table, a voice at the table, to share my viewpoints from a different perspective and represent underrepresented groups, not just for Sebastopol, but within the region. So that's, you know, what I'm hoping to do. And along the way, I'm hoping to encourage other participants and reach out to families, individuals, reach out to maybe some of those families where their kids are homeschooling, but may not have either the internet or the computer equipment to fairly participate in the school. And those are the people that need to be helped. So it's encouraging, setting examples, maybe joining other committees in our region, in the county. I've spoken with Supervisor, our county supervisor, to talk about what committees I might be interested in when I am elected to city council. And so we've had some discussions on that. And of course, I'm always available if you guys want to do other forums. Anybody else wants to reach out, I'm always available.
You have 2 more minutes.
Thank you, Devin. Oh, here's a quick yes or no. Do you condemn the recent riots caused by Antifa and BLM that have been happening all over the United States?
Yeah, I mean, of course. Absolutely. That's peaceful protest is what this country is about.
All right, thank you. And then what are the most pressing issues in our community that you would like to focus on?
So first of all, getting our city upright as far as the pandemic. The city has taken a big hit with their budget. So how can we make up for that? The housing issue that I mentioned is important to help create more housing in our area, and we have to be kind of creative about that, and continue to find ways and set examples for our environment. And that would include our parks, places for people to hike, walk, and keep encouraging that, keeping our air clean. So any of those types, I think, would be my top priorities.
All right, thank you. I don't think we have time for another one. So thank you so much, Evert, for joining us. It was a pleasure. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing. It makes a difference. It's made a difference to me because you got my attention. And so don't think it doesn't make a difference. I hope you realize that you do influence lives and you do influence opinions. So keep it going. And when I'm on city council, I hope to hear from you and hear your opinions on different subjects.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Neysa Hinton is in the waiting room. So I'll let her in right now. And pass it over to Noah.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Looking forward to our next segment starting in just a few minutes. So I'll just take a moment to introduce myself. So my name is Noah Polston Schwartz, and I go to Annalee High School. My preferred pronouns are she, her, hers. Yeah. And I'm a part of the Annalee Activist Group, as well as Teach Climate and Redefine It, climate education. So, yeah, I'm really excited to be here with you, Neysa, and just like the last couple of segments, we're going to be opening up the questions in the chat, and I'll be reading them out. So, yeah. I'll be the moderator for this segment with Neysa Hinton, sorry about that. And it's me going from 6:29 to 6:49. So Neysa, thank you so much for being here tonight. Our 20 minutes will be over at 6:49 and we'll be given a 3-minute warning by Devin, of course. And if it's okay with you, we'd like to start off with a brief overview of your platform, and then people are free to start typing questions in the chat or use the raise your hand feature to raise your hand, or first do it. So Neysa, I'm going to pass it over to you if you want to just give a quick overview about your platform and what you're running on.
Okay, well, first of all, hello everybody. Nice to see you tonight. And thanks for letting me go last. I worked today, so I just got home a little bit ago. So I'm an incumbent. I've been elected as for 1 term, which has been 4 years. And so I'm running for a 2nd term. I say that because somebody once told me when I ran 4 years ago, you never want to be a 1-term political or elected official, because you're just getting your feet wet in your first term and you're kind of learning how it all works. And so I think I really took that to heart, and I do think it's true. So I haven't been on the council for more than 1 term, so I feel like I still bring a lot of fresh ideas and opinions and passion to the role. So I am running as an incumbent. I was born and raised in Sebastopol. My parents went to school here, I went to school here, and my children went to school here. So I also bring that to the council. I think that's unique. Not to say Sebastopol isn't welcoming to all, but I do know the town really well because I grew up here. My platform is housing. It was my #1 issue when I ran 4 years ago, and I think it continues to be a very challenging issue, and especially important in Sebastopol because having raised children here, I know myself when I came back, it was really hard to get in the housing market, and now for my children, it feels like it's almost impossible. So we need to figure some things out related to housing. I also am running just generally, I am a very accessible city council member, and I like to be collaborative in my role on council. I tend to do my research before a project, and that includes talking to people in the city, a lot of times visiting the businesses that we're discussing. And so I think I have a background in communication, and I think I'm a pretty good communicator. Also, I see Sunny on the call. I've done a lot for zero waste. Hi, Sunny. I sponsored the electronic packet ordinance, and that passed on a 3-2. Not everyone on the council was in favor of that, but at my third try, we finally got it approved. And so prior to me bringing that forth, we were just printing paper packets, and many times I would save my favorites, but I would go recycle all the rest, and we were wasting so much paper. So I'm really proud about that. I do a lot of committee work on the Russian River watershed. I also sit on a district regional body of ag and open space. So I think protecting the environment, but also trying to do smart growth is a really important part of the platform. Those are the main three things.
Great. Thank you so much. So one of the questions in the chat is, what is your plan to increase Sebastopol's fire preparedness and resiliency? So if you want to talk just for a minute more about your climate policy and specifically your plan to work on our fires.
So I am on the fire department long-term staffing committee. So I am pretty close to it. I've met with the fire department quite a bit. It's a complicated subject because we have the smallest city budget of any city in Sonoma County. We love our volunteers, longtime dedicated volunteers down at the fire department. And because we have our own police force here, which takes a large portion of our budget versus other cities that sub that out to, like the sheriff's department, Windsor and Sonoma are two that come to mind. Every body like that, fire department and police department, take a lot of city funds to have your own designated department. We added, and I recommended it from the budget subcommittee, a full-time fireman position last year, and we were scheduled to add a second this year. But in light of the budget problems that we have during COVID, the budget subcommittee, at least at this point, is not recommending moving forward on the second position long-term. We are on another emergency front, because I think there's a real need for that. We have Map Your Neighborhood, and I found out that Map Your Neighborhood could use a little bit of administrative support. We're doing a great job, but we don't have, like, if somebody says, I want to be a Map Your Neighborhood person, how do I get started? We don't have like a super simple packet to send them and say, this is what you do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in the budget that's coming forth tomorrow night, there is a recommendation, which I brought forth, to add, I think it's $6,000 to admin support and marketing for the Map Your Neighborhood program, so that we could get more organized and roll that out. Because I do believe we need more fire support, but we also need more volunteers within our communities that can really help their neighbors with emergency preparedness.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was great. So another quick question is, what are your plans to shift Sebastopol towards more sustainable practices? Because, you know, our whole climate crisis is a huge problem, especially we're so lucky that many Sebastopol residents are super interested and involved. So what are your ideas to really tackle the climate crisis on a smaller scale level?
Yeah, well, again, we are finalizing our interviews for our new climate committee. And in fact, there's an interview tomorrow morning that I'm participating in at 9 a.m. So my idea first is that committee is going to really give us a lot more recommendations about things that we can implement. And, you know, I have had ideas, and then 4 years ago when I ran, I wanted to bring composting and recycling back to Sebastopol. And then you learn things, and you learn, oh, the compost thing's a lot more complicated, and the recycling redemption places don't really work. And so that's why there's fewer of them now than there were 4 years ago, not more. And so I really think that by bringing that climate committee, launching that climate committee, then we're going to get some good recommendations about what we should move forward on. I think Sebastopol is at the forefront of of zero waste and green practices. We just approved a new garbage truck that runs on, I believe, diesel, like runs cleaner. We obviously have our solar ordinance, so we've passed, we don't use bottled water or disposable anymore in all our city buildings. I mean, these are all things that we continue. We passed no straws, we passed, all these ordinances in my 4 years, and I think that we continue to pass those. It's super important, especially with the fires, to get climate change under control. I think every little thing that we can do, whether that's teaching my own kids to recycle or everything that they do down at the farm market to teach the average person, because I still think the average person does not know what goes in which bin, and that's super frustrating and difficult. But I want to wait to see what that committee recommends, because those are people that are really going to take the bull by the horns and come up with recommendations for our city. And then in our limited budget, we need to implement the ones that get us the furthest down the road.
Great. Thank you very much. So another question from Amy Cohen. Have you been involved in the movement for Black Lives in Sebastopol?
So by involved, I'm not exactly sure what she means, but I did go down to the mural and speak with the organizers the day that the mural was painted and put my handprints down proudly. I also voted for it and have defended it as an art project that's a sign of our times. I work during the day. I'm not a retired person. And I run an assisted living for the elderly, which I do 4 days a week on site and 1 day a week from home. So sometimes day events can be challenging for me. And so I would say that, and I reposted about the mural on my Facebook. That is my city Facebook. So I did not participate in the protest. Because of what I do for a living, I can't really participate responsibly in protests. So not in that form, but I showed support in other ways.
Awesome, thank you. Another question we have is, what are your plans to help small businesses to come out of the pandemic in a strong way?
So most recently, I sponsored, and same thing, 3 tries, the zero interest loan program, where the city council put $150,000 up for $10,000, $5,000 bridge loans to help businesses stay solvent. I also noticed that, I think it came out the night we passed that, or the next night, that the county put out a business program also that's currently still taking applications right now. We did not have that posted on our City of Sebastopol website. And as soon as I noticed, I immediately told City Hall and management to make sure to get that on our city website, so that our local businesses could also be aware of that program that was coming out of Sonoma County's Economic Development Program. I've also been working on the Parklet program that we are still trying to work that up and see if that works for Sebastopol. But I do believe that by having places for our citizens to go in downtown and enjoy safely some food and stop along the way, that will encourage also shopping. When you generally go down and buy a meal and you cruise by a shop, you might see something in the window and support that business. So I think that would also help us actually get our merchants through at least the holiday season, for sure.
Great, yeah, for sure. We have another question, which is, what can be done to help increase the commercial base in Sebastopol?
Well, we work really closely with Recology, and I do know that some merchants have been more on board than others. I know that, from both, construction sites and restaurants are the 2 biggest folks that have a lot of extra waste. And I brought it up in my interviews with some of our candidates and asked if they were going to focus on that as something we could turn around quicker, because I think that wherever the most waste happens is where we need to really zero in and get them on board with things. So Again, I just go back to waiting to have this committee put together and then decide what we're going to tackle first.
For sure. Great. Another question from Nora. How do you plan to involve youth in city government, and how do you plan to involve more youth in our community?
So, well, I think by talking to youth and holding these forums, working with youth is the best way. I mean, I have 2 children in their 20s. I was much more involved with youth in schools, obviously, when my kids were in school, but they're not that far out. I did really advocate for our youngest planning commissioner, whose endorsement I have, Luke's, in my campaign to get him on the planning commission. I would like to see more youth involvement and more openings. I also mentored one of our youth members, Haley Trowbridge, on the Ag and Open Space Board that I sit. There's 15 people on there, an opportunity to mentor 2 youth, and I mentored her for a year as my junior member that I worked with there. So I think I've shown that I want the youth to be involved, and I'm willing to put kind of I want to say my money where my mouth is, but basically my vote's where my mouth is. I think that if youth step up, that we need to answer the call, and doesn't matter how old you are. People say age is just a number. I do believe that.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Mateo. If you want to unmute, the floor is yours. Thank you, Neysa.
I didn't ask a question.
Okay. So the next question we have is, what have you already done to create more affordable housing? I think you addressed this a little bit in the beginning, but we have another question about what have you already done in your previous term?
So the biggest thing that I've done is, since I was elected, I sit as a subcommittee member of Pine Grove Square. Or sorry, not Pine Grove Square. Sorry, Park Village. So Park Village was created. Well, the city, before I got on council, bought Park Village to convert it to a park. So we're talking about the trailer park that's on the east side of Sebastopol when you come over the bridge. And then when I got on council, it was a lot of talk and determined that the city council was paying $80,000 a year to have a manager manage the trailer park there. And it was already, I'm not going to take credit, it was already in movement by a previous council member, Robert Jacob and Sarah Gurney, to look at a plan where we could hire an outside organization. We did ultimately settle on West County Community Services, and that was a committee I really wanted to be on because I knew it could make a big change quickly. We converted that park. We went to the council. We asked for more money than the $80,000, and we made an investment, I felt like, in low-income housing there and to help house our local preference homeless in Sebastopol. And we have already rotated 9 residents in the last 4 years that were housed there that have gone on to independent living and living independent lives. And we continue to improve that property. That is the #1 thing for low-income housing that I believe Sebastopol has done in the last 4 years.
Okay, great, thank you. We have another question from Sala. So the question is, do you support Measure P, the local county measure for police oversight and accountability?
I have endorsed Measure P. I think that the money is going to come out of the sheriff's budget, and I think that oversight generally is a good thing. And as long as I think somebody, I'll just use myself as an example. I run an assisted living for the elderly. I report to community care licensing. They have oversight over my facility. They can walk in anytime. They can look at my records. If I have nothing to hide, what's the problem? And that's how I approach oversight, just as a general rule of thumb.
Great, thank you. So, anyone else have any questions to ask? Feel free to put in the chat or unmute. Another question we have is, do you support defunding or divesting from the police? If so, how would you make it happen in Sebastopol, especially taking the stacked budget into account?
So I understand that defunding does not mean necessarily defunding, but we are waiting for a consultant to come back with recommendations. I feel like it's really easy to jump on an issue and make assumptions without having all the facts. I like to wait and not necessarily, I like to approach things with fairness to all. I think that the police department maybe has had some missteps for sure. I think they're behind in training and some other things, but I'm not in charge of the police department. I'm not their boss. I think the right thing we did was to hire somebody who could be a neutral party and can help advise us for things that we need to have happen there correctly. So we're waiting for that report, and that will include recommendations about funding. It does show, and 45% of our budget, and I have seen that actually since I was elected to council. It used to be a few percentages higher, to be honest. I've been on budget subcommittee for the last 3 years, and we've been very careful about our money, which is why we had enough in reserves going into COVID that we're still okay in the city of Sebastopol. But the percentage of 45 is higher because we're the smallest city budget in all of Sonoma County. So just by percentage, that is higher. So we'll have to see how that report comes out. I have recommended in the budget that we'll look at tomorrow, and I'm not speaking out of turn because this has already been presented to the public, for a shared social worker to take those jobs off our police officer. And myself and Una Glass are bringing that forward as to share with another small city a possible contract with West County Community Services, for example, for mental health issues. So we have a placeholder recommended, and then once we get our report from the consultant and we get into the first of the year, we might be able to look at like something like that for our own police department.
You have 1 more minute.
Thank you, Devin. One more question, I think we'll have time for one more, is to be more specific, like, please tell us more about your plans to make living here more affordable. I know you don't have a ton of time, but if you want to do a quick overview of just some exact plans to make living here more.
Well, I mean, that's a difficult question. And having lived here and watched the prices creep up and up, I mean, it just continues to get more expensive here because people continue to want to live in Sebastopol. One thing I do think we could do is, I was not for dropping our inclusionary housing percentage from 20% to 15%. We did that to see if we could spur more development. I would be for raising that back up to 20% from 15 as it was previous. The other thing that we could do is possibly expand our granny unit square footage. So sorry, I'm using the term granny unit, but accessory dwelling unit, additional units. We set the cap at 1,000 square feet, and that's really difficult for a small family. And I understand it could go up to, I can't quite recall if it's 1,200 or 1,250 square feet, but I would be for revisiting that and considering expanding that so those units could be used for starter home for small families or to rent as well.
Okay, I think our segment is over, Neysa, right now, but thank you so much for all your clearly and very thought out answers. You did a great job. I'm gonna pass it over to Nora to conclude our Q&A. So thank you very much.
Real quick, if we could answer Maria's question on the expertise our next council would need, it sounds like that would be appreciated.
Of course, yeah. So the question is, what expertise does our next council need?
Well, so I think a council is a representation of the city. So what I bring to the city is my background in managing budgets for companies and operations for companies, and my currently my COVID expertise and my ability to work with seniors. I'm a working mother. Well, my kids are a little grown now, so they're not here all the time, but my daughter will be visiting tonight to do laundry. I think I represent a group of citizens in Sebastopol, and I'm still working. I still have a mortgage. I still understand how difficult it is for my children to try to buy homes here. And I understand all their issues, even getting health insurance. So I feel like council, the ideal council of 5 people should bring strengths and to their role, and they should speak for our entire city. So, you know, you bring your experiences in life and your experiences in your job, and that's where we're at. So I hope that answered the question, but I know I feel like I bring a unique perspective that represents many of our citizens in Sebastopol.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Nora, and my preferred pronouns are she, her, and they, them. I go to Santa Rosa High with the Art Quiz Theater program, and I am part of the Annalee Sunrise Hub and Sebastopol BLM Visibility Team. And I just wanted to say thank you so much, everyone, for coming. All of you guys, candidates and voters. We'll put the link to the recording on our Instagram and our YouTube, and if it's helpful, we can email it to you if you request it as well. Have a nice evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much for taking the time. I will do my best to get any unanswered questions to the candidate. Have a nice rest of your evening, everybody.
I think we can go ahead and like remove the other people from the Zoom, I think.
It was really quiet and I couldn't stop laughing.
You have
What?
the ability to remove people?
Yes, I think I do.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to.
Okay, I have to go. Bye, guys.